In this video, I'm going to show you how I mix colored mason stain pigments into porcelain. These are mason stains. They come in a wide range of colors, and in this demo, I'm going to be using the dark teal color. It's very important to take the proper safety precautions when working with mason stain pigments. They come in a dry powder, which is very hazardous to breathe, and once it's mixed into water, it's not a respiration hazard, but if you're going to be working with the dry powder, it's important to do that under proper ventilation and wearing a mask and eye protection. But the method that I'm going to show you is a way to do this more conveniently and safely because the dry powder stays inside a plastic bag at all times. You can buy mason stains in pre-measured bags like this, which eliminates the need to measure them yourself. That one is a half-pound bag, but normally I buy quarter-pound bags, and with that amount I can color about 10 pounds of clay. So I'm gathering my supplies here. I had gloves, a water bottle, and I'm working on a wooden board covered with canvas. And I'm simply going to just take the spray bottle and aim it into the top of the plastic bag, and I'm gathering the bag around the spray bottle so that I don't allow any dust to get out. I'm going to mix the water and powder into a paste, which is all done while it's inside the bag, so this is the safest way to do it. I'm holding the top closed with one hand and mixing with the other hand, and I'm going to be repeating this process several times, adding a little bit more water each time until I can feel that the consistency of the mixture is becoming more like a paste. And you'll need to add just enough water so that it mixes with all the powder, but not too much so that it becomes watery. And you'll also be able to see through the plastic bag what exactly it looks like when the mixture is ready. So at this point you can see that it's the right consistency, and I'm just going to close the bag and put that aside for a minute while I get my clay out. I've got about 4 pounds of clay here, and that's not enough clay to use up all of this color, so whatever I don't use, I'm just going to leave it in the plastic bag for use for another time. I'm breaking up the clay into small handfuls, and I'm going to be making an indentation in the middle of each one to pour the color into. Some people like to measure very specific amounts of mason stain in a ratio to the clay. I've always found that it works pretty fine for my purposes to just mix about a quarter pound of mason stain pigment plus water plus about 10 pounds of clay. You can scale that down to work with less materials, and that's what works for me. But for some colors, it does make a significant difference depending on how much you use. Now at this stage, I'm basically just working the color into the clay to the point where it's no longer running out. Now I've done this to all the pieces of clay, and at this point I'm mixing it all together a little bit. You can see that the color is still not fully mixed into the clay, and eventually I want it to be thoroughly mixed so that you don't see any streaks of white clay. It's a good idea to, by the way, to keep a wet sponge nearby, and whenever you see that the clay on your hands is getting dry, just add some water. This prevents any dry crumbs of clay from being mixed into the batch, and it also protects your workspace from any dry dust that you might be breathing. I'm going to divide this clay again into several smaller handfuls, whatever is a manageable size for wedging, and then I'm going to wedge them up until the color is thoroughly mixed. You'll be able to see the difference here when you finally get a really nice uniform color. Now I'm about to show you an additional step that's completely optional, but sometimes I like to do this to make sure that all of the pieces of clay are the same shade of color. So for example, if I had mixed a lot less pigment into one of these pieces and one turned out lighter than the other one, this way I'm randomly mixing them all together and wedging them again, and that way I'm getting a completely uniform batch of color. But this isn't essential. In fact, you can get a whole range of shades of one particular mason stain color depending on the amount of clay. It can be more concentrated for a dark shade, or you can get a paler shade by adding only a small amount. This is the way I store my clay. I wrap it in a wet cloth, and then I put that inside a double layer of plastic Ziploc bags. And if you periodically change the cloth, you can actually keep this piece of clay just like new for months or even years, although hopefully you'll get around to working with it sooner than that. So that's the basic method of mixing by hand. Pretty simple, but it can be a bit time consuming, so I don't usually like to do this on the same day as I'm going to be working on the creative side of the project with making patterns. So I usually prepare different colors of clay that I'm going to plan to use, and that way I have a color palette to work with. Now the rest of the narikomi process after this clay mixing is by far the more fun, creative part of actually using this colored clay to create all different kinds of effects. You can make marbled designs, you can make stripes, checkerboards, flowers, planet landscapes, which is what I like to make, and that's the main part of the process. So that's what I would want to focus on in a teaching workshop, and I wanted to just make this video to show how to do this preparation and, most importantly, how to work safely with mason stains. The last thing I'm just going to show you at the end here is an example of what this teal green color looks like after firing. I'm going to show you one of my planet pieces that was made with a Skinner blend of teal green, and you can see all the different variation in shading that you can get with just this one color.